acting for an inclusive world, equal gender representation in the jobs of the future. We are going to have this panel. Just before that, on that topic, there is a specific call to action and recommendation by the Women's Forum. It's to develop a gender transformative education plan at the national level to achieve gender parity in tertiary STEM education and build tailored reskilling and upskilling programs to equip women with STEM skills and facilitate their participation in the jobs of the future. I forgot to mention just before that all these recommendations and call to action will be given to Lisa Paus, who is the Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth at noon, so a little bit later on. So now I'm going to welcome on stage Maru Winnacker for our next panel. Maru Winnacker has not arrived. Yes, are you here? Please come, Maru. You can welcome her. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. I'm very excited of being here. And what I really like about the Women's Forum is that it's really about concrete action steps and like clear solutions. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an investor, and I run an investment firm, Urania Ventures, which is a French-German family office. And we are investing in deep tech companies, and like companies that do space technologies, quantum computing. And we are very proud of the fact that 58% of our portfolio is founded by women. And that's a fact. It's not something that we did by purpose. When we just, but of course, one of our purpose is to ensure that more women are getting funding. But we just invest in the best talent, And I think one reason why we have this high ratio of female founders is that we are 2 women running this investment firm. And when you look at the distribution of global wealth, 1.1% of the global wealth is distributed is owned by 1.1% of the global population holds 45.8% of the global wealth. And that global wealth is mainly owned by entrepreneurs. And this is what drives us as an investment firm to really ensure that more women get access to funding opportunities, and especially also in the STEM field. And one concrete action step, what we also do as an investment firm, as we invest in venture capital funds too, we invest in venture capital funds when there is at least 1 woman as a partner in the team, to ensure that there are more VC investors with women on the decision-making side, and that more female founders get access to let's say fair partners and like doing unbiased decisions. So I'm really excited of being here and would like to introduce you to our panelists. So next to me is Jeanne Kehren. Jeanne graduated from the Maison Alfort Veterinary School and holds a master in virology from the Pasteur Institute and a PhD in immunology from the Paris 7 University. Jeanne Kehren started her career at Novartis, where she worked in different R&D roles and drove the integration of innovative technologies in drug development. She also fostered the integration of large-scale data in preclinical and clinical investigations and developed biomarker and stratification approaches across different disease areas. Jeanne joined Bayer on July 1st, 2019, heading digital and commercial innovation. As of 2021, she has been appointed Chief Information Officer, Pharmaceuticals, in addition to her other responsibilities. Then we have Jutta Allmendinger, President of the Berlin Science Center and Professor of Sociology at Humboldt University, Berlin. In addition, she serves as Honorary Professor of Sociology at Freie University Berlin. Her multiple honors and awards include the German Federal Cross of Merit First Class. Jutta Allmendinger serves on several advisory boards in Germany and abroad, and in 2021, she has been appointed as a member of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences by the Holy Father. and as a member of the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council by the UK government, which she leads under the German G7 presidency in 2021. Yes. So, Caitlin Kraft-Buchman founded Women at the Table, a global gender equality and democracy civil society organization based in Geneva, Switzerland. Women at the Table focuses on advancing feminist systems change by leveraging points in the economy, sustainability, democratic governance, and technology by using the prism of technology, innovation, and AI. In 2019, she co-founded the A+ Alliance, a global coalition championing inclusive AI and affirmative action for algorithms in order to build gender and racial equality in a world where machine learning does not wire an already biased system into our future. And she is also an advisor to the W7 of the G7 German presidency. So my first question goes to Jutta Allmendinger. Yes. So STEM skills account for 70% of the rapidly growing skills that are transforming the labor market. And women are still underrepresented, and especially in G7 countries, what made me really, I was really shocked about it, that women represent 28% of STEM graduates and only 20% of graduates in engineering, manufacturing, and construction. And when I saw these numbers, I was really shocked that we still have these low numbers of female STEM graduates. And why do you think is this still so?
Well, there are a couple of factors. Most of those, I think, is socialization still, and huge stereotyping against women who are going in this direction. So you could already see it at school. If you look at German school books, it's really gender biased, who is doing what. If you look at universities, how women and men are approached, if they are studying these subjects, there is huge differences. I have a personal remark on this because a very good friend of mine, a very young student, she's excelling in this part. So she is a mathematician and she's doing IT a lot. And during the last 2 years, they didn't meet at a university because they were only on Zoom. And now universities in Germany opened. She's meeting her fellow students for the first time. They're exchanging, so what are your grades in the last exams? And she said, well, I always wrote the best one. And then in particular the men, but also women said, we would never have thought it. And she is a blonde woman, you know, like a stereotype of a beautiful young lady. And nobody thought that she can do this job well. And so she asked me, do I look stupid? And this is exactly what I mean. And it happens, and this now as a personal anecdote, but if you read peer-reviewed published papers, you can still and always see this huge bias. And we also do it in my institution with a lot of experiments where we see that this bias is not decreasing, really. Also the number and the percentage of women who are taking this job and want to stay in this job is increasing. And we still have, you know, this rolling out, even women who finished their studies, once they enter the occupation, they disappear much more often than men do. So there are a lot of problems, and you have this leaking pipeline, as we usually call it.
So, Jeanne, you're a woman in STEM, coming from a scientific background in virology and immunology. And why do you think do we have still these low numbers? And do you have maybe like 1 or 2 examples of concrete actions what you think what we can do about it that we can increase the participation?
So it's not exactly the same situation whether you consider biology, medicine, or physics, mathematics, IT, data science. In biology, it seems that women have made it.
Yeah.
Not at the top, But, if I look at where I'm coming from, you've got today 80% of the veterinary students who are female. So it's a competitive entrance in France, for example, and it's 80%.
Germany as well. But
Yeah.
then tell me how many women lead. In Germany, it's, I think, 5%. So it's 80% who finish it and 5% leading.
Yeah, so the change, the change in the workforce is happening. The change at the top is not, and actually, that's also part of the root cause. And it's even worse for mathematics and technologies, because where are the role models? Where do you see the women in the living room, the role, somebody who can really inspire the younger generation, say, okay, I want to become this. And it's true for, academics. It's true for also entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Not enough women being leading in STEM and startups, and so not enough of them being visible. Historically, we also know that women have been made strangely invisible, even when they were actually responsible for the real discovery of the real innovation. So concretely, we need to find and really promote those role models who can inspire the younger generation to step up. And as you said, we need to tackle out the really systemic biases that start super early. We need to retrain and educate the professors, the teachers, even in elementary school. Stop putting in the heads of women that they can't, or girls, that they can't do mathematics, that they cannot do, IT or these kind of things. Because otherwise, when we stay with a minority, it's sometimes a very lonely road for the ones who are going there. And a one where you actually need to have a skin way thicker than your age. So
This is very well.
Yeah, speaking of biases, Caitlin, when I learned more about what you're doing, I saw this quote. To correct the real-life bias and barriers that prevent women, girls, and all people marginalized from achieving full participation in rights in the present and the future, we must ensure that machine learning does not embed already biased systems into our collective futures. So can you explain me how Women at the Table works to achieve unbiased machine learning?
Hi, thank you. Well, first of all, we have a quote that we love, which is from Marshall McLuhan, who's a media theorist from the 60s, called, "We shape our tools, and therefore our tools shape us thereafter." So that's the history of technology. We invent a clock to pray, the monks to pray, but it becomes sort of the beginning of the middle class and sort of bureaucratization of the world, where everybody starts at 9, ends at 12, and it becomes a metronome. So these new systems that we're inventing now are going to be with us for probably another 100, 200 years. Part of the problem is the invisibility of women and other marginalized folk in the data. So you said invisible women, invisible role models, but we also see that women have not been part of clinical trials. We see that women have not been part of data collection on sort of any level. We see it for safety dummies in terms of crash tests. We see it in terms of, anyway, it goes all the way through. You're going to hear about the Apple credit card. You may have just heard about it, where two equal people with the same tax returns, one person of the couple had 10 times more credit than the other person, and that happened to be a man. And that algorithm, or that series of algorithms, were not taught about gender. They were not taught about women existing. But what machines do very beautifully is understand patterns. And so they understand these patterns of unseen bias, of this unconscious bias, of this entrenched bias. And so we have to be very careful about what we're implementing as public systems, and how these automated decision-making, which we call algorithmic decision-making, gets deployed in governments. Post-COVID, every government in the world, north, south, east, west, has decided to go, because they've had to, right, to sort of digitizing systems. And part of the problem has been that governments have just decided, they would take a spreadsheet and then make it digital, and therefore they would be a digital government. But that's just taking an old system, an old sort of equation, and not rethinking about its utility for this particular century, these decades, taking things from the 50s or before, and just sort of writing them out and then optimizing for better traffic flow as opposed to creating greater efficiency and efficacy. No longer efficiency, but real efficacy for the people. And in conclusion to that one thing, because I don't want to talk too long, I think that this is going to also ossify, unless we deal with this now, inequalities further. And I think this is a great danger to democracy, which is why we also work on democratic governance.
Thank you. So Jutta, when we spoke before, I really liked that we are in sync, that we think intentions are good, but results are the ones that matter, yeah? So I would like to know how your institute works in concrete, and also how can we better measure the initiatives or the tools or action steps that you advise on? So is there something that you can do, like a performance measurement, like for these, like how do you work and how can we ensure that we get the results?
I most certainly can't tell you about the work of 500 people, something like this. I mean, we are political scientists, we are sociologists, we are psychologists, we are in particular behavioral economists, and we are lawyers, and all those people work together on different issues, on democracy, on global relations and things like this. But of course, you know, looking at this topic, we also work on a lot of gender stuff. And the last research was that we entered Tinder. And the question was whether or not we are more attractive. I mean, I was not part of it, but my young women were part of it. Whether young women are more attractive to men and got more clicks, can we please meet, when they have female occupations rather than male occupations. And the same we did vice versa for men. Are men more attractive if they have male occupations rather than? So we also, you know, got a lot of attractive men in our institute, and we took fantastic photographs. And the most depressing result is that this hypothesis turned out to be true. So all my women who, you know, said, well, I have this female typed occupation, are much more interesting for men, for, you know, dates and partnerships and things like this. But also in reverse, you know, men with more male occupations are much more interesting for women. So this is really depressing, and it goes back to, you know, to my biases. So there is really a lot to change. And of course, I mean, there is not so much we can do, but to look, as I have said before, to the programs for teachers and to decrease, you know, the stereotypes teachers have. To tell you another experiment which we did, we wrote applications to form, and it was exactly the same vita. The only difference was that one woman took 2 months off for parental leave and the other woman took 12 months off for parental leave. And the same we did for fathers. So one father took out 2 months of parental leave, the other one 12 months of parental leave. And then we waited who was getting invited. For men, it didn't make any difference. So if men behave, you know, unlike the majority of men and take 12 months of leave, they are invited at the same quote as men who take out 2 months. So nothing happens. But for women, the most depressing results, and we replicated this study to 19, to 20, to 21, is that women who take off 10 months have a higher likelihood getting invited for a job talk compared to women who take off 2 months. And this means, everything, because you know that the interruption of women really makes a huge difference of their career advancements. Leaning in is a key word. And then, of course, we track everything we say, not just in terms of media coverage, but also in terms of invitations to the political parties and whether or not it influences like now the coalition plan. So it's not just doing ground-based, empirical, high-level quality work, getting published in peer-reviewed journals. It's also getting out to the public, going to museums, to libraries. And we have now huge networks of, organizations who are in the middle of Berlin, who are working with us and give us opportunities to bring our knowledge to the people, rather than waiting until the people, come to this wonderful social science center.
Okay, and thank you. And speaking of like that results matter and role models, I mean, Bayer made gender parity a CEO matter, and also the goal to achieve gender parity by 2030. And I think it's a great example also for the audience and other corporates. If you can give 2 examples, what are the steps Bayer is doing to reach this goal?
So 2 ways. The first one is, I would say, the more concrete and hard matters. We measure and we monitor. We also analyzed, which helped us to really tackle when you have this famous leaky pipeline, which is at that delicate step when you start to go from management to really next step of management and going to director, senior director. That's where we lose the women. So it's also when you realize, by the way, that women, we have a lot of high potential. And the cool stuff is that they remain potential for a very long time. Very long. Yeah. It's not only Bayer. I had exactly the same findings in my 2 previous companies. We also, all those measures are helping us to objectivize what are the pain points. Women are getting trainings, men are getting opportunities. So that's the, but until you put the data under, I would say, the nose of the people who are making the decisions, it's hard for them to realize that it's exactly what's going on. And then there is the softer part. It's the influential part. I'll try to get more and more women visible as figures of authorities. It's hard for people, and it's exactly reflecting also what you said. It's still hard for a society where the constant visual of authority was male to acknowledge that authority can be female and can be different from our stereotypes. So every time we've got the opportunity to also promote women visibility, we do it. It has to be a constant, little music in the background that will be there all the time to get people used to that, acknowledgement that authority doesn't have a gender. And by the way, it's also something I was doing in my previous company. We had organized a mentoring across the company, and it was organized by the Gender Balance Group. We were admitting women and men and young men in their career. The untold rules that was systematically the mentors for men would be women. Just get used to it.
This is fantastic, yeah. So, Caitlin, when we spoke, I just kept in mind your quote that it's about that you want to distinguish quantitative versus qualitative women in STEM. What do you mean?
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, obviously, we need parity, and we need more diversity in STEM. That's very clear, and we're all 100% for that. But I think we're also looking, I work a lot with the IPU, the Interparliamentary Union, and they talk a lot about quantitative representation in concert with qualitative. And that means progressive people, people who are going to help other women, other marginalized folks, but also qualitative for me, diversity in all of its, what we now consider traditional forms, but also diversity in terms of discipline, in terms of thought. So for STEM, as we see that there's going to be AI more and more, AI that's just going to be able to, it's just going to plug and play, and you're going to be able to just produce an AI system. There are going to be people who are going to be writing that code, but coding is going to become so ubiquitous. What we really need are critical thinkers, usually who come from the social sciences, philosophy, and we need those critical thinkers to be working with the technologists, because this technology is too important to be left to STEM and technologists. It needs to be a group enterprise where we imagine a future together. And sadly, most STEM education, talking about reforming and transforming the educational system, is it's very rigid. So critical thinking, actually, even in the most elite universities, is not necessarily encouraged, even at a master's level, in computer science or data science. And what we need are the people who are going to ask the questions, punch the holes, rethink, ask about the experiments, and then the technologists are really excited to have something beautiful to build. So that's what I mean about the quantitative versus the qualitative. So women should be there, but also different kinds of men and women in the qualitative part.
Jutta wants to add something.
No, it's exactly what we need. I mean, we are not really working together across disciplines, and we have seen it, during the Corona crisis, which did not yet end, that we never really thought about unintended consequences for the social life in general, for our children, for women who really experienced a backlash, and we can show this empirically in Germany very, very well. And this is that we have to work together across disciplines to really, and this comes close to what you have saying, that you have different opinions, and this is also all about diversity. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Women have been paying a price which is over proportional.
Absolutely.
And wait until climate change.
Yes.
Consequences. It's exactly the same thing.
And then we have to look at the gender budgeting, which didn't take place because male occupations received so much more money as Corona sort of support compared to female occupations. And we do have to install it now rapidly because it's the same will happen with climate change, with energy, with nourishment chains and things like this. So it's about women in crisis.
I mean, you wrote a book last year. You published it. Es geht nur gemeinsam. We can only reach it together. And it's a step-by-step plan to ensure that gender parity is not something that we are demanding, but to make it a fact. I really like it. So, what are like one or two more examples that you have described in your book for it?
Well, I wrote this book at the beginning of the COVID because I was invited in a huge evening talk show, and I said, well, please look at women as well and what's happening to them and to children. And this was sort of an outcry, and I was immediately unable to do anything else but answering questions from journalists. So I thought, I'm writing a book and then they can read this. But away from this, I see that we have so many initiatives for women to go into STEM, and we have this since decades. But we do not have many initiatives for men to go in female occupations, like in caring occupations and things like this. And we really have to do this accordingly. It's not just that women have to do the work of men, it's also the other way around. And if we talk about gender wage gaps, if we talk about gender care gaps, if we talk about gender pension gaps, which are the hugest gaps, the question always is, how do you want to close this gap? Do we want to close this gap in women becoming men, having the same, trajectories, working the same way their entire life, and then also have children, which they want, but men also want? Or do we want to men coming more, towards female career trajectories. And this was a basic question, and therefore my clear answer is that we have to increase the parental leave of fathers, that we have to increase times of part-time work for men, and that it's not just the one sex who moves in the direction of the other one, but that the other one also have to move in the direction of and then we will come to a much more equal society, which also guarantees women to have higher chances, because it's much more easier for them to reach leadership roles. And the other thing which is really to my heart is that I think it's really important to increase the number of women in leading positions. As you said, we are role models. It makes a difference for the new incoming students or women in different fields. But it's not because we lead in a different way, most certainly not. It's not because we are nicer. It's not because we invest in teams and making everybody comfortable. We lead exactly like men do. We have the same variety in leadership styles as men have. And we want to be included as leaders because we know exactly as much, because we are as good as men, because we have the same competences as men. So it's a question of equal rights. It's not a question of being different from men.
Yeah. And speaking of also power, when we spoke before, and I really would like to, if you can actually give again this example, what Caitlin also mentioned about Apple Pay case, because I think it's also good to have this confidence that women have a lot of power actually when it comes to like purchasing power, etc., decision-making power, and because women are like targeted by a lot of advertisers, and so they make the decisions what kind of products are bought. And I really like that example that you gave.
Just a very quick word on what you said. For biopharma, things changed when we went from a single woman at the Exco to have a diversity of women at the Exco. And we are diverse, and we all have different characters, different ways of leading. And it's fine, because it also shows there is no stereotype. Coming back to that example is always what I say, algorithms and data are not biased. People are. People who are going to put the data together, collect the data, and analyze the data are. So the famous Apple Pay thing is that you take exactly the same revenues and profiles, and you end up having a difference in credit rate. Why? Because the data used to build the algorithm were outdated data at the time where women didn't have a career, a revenue, and so the profile was different. It's dramatic, but I mean, they got such a storm, and that they corrected it. It's even more dramatic when it comes to health data, when it can lead to a down prioritization of women's care, because they are usually in the database underrepresented. It's also what happened for women and Black people in Californian hospitals before they had to urgently correct for those bias. We need to have much more diversity in the collection of data, in the way we think about the questions, and the way we are going to build this algorithmic world, which is super nice and super efficient. But it's, if we don't pay attention, is going to amplify all the distortions.
So, do we have time for one more question?
One question.
One question, maybe from the next generation.
Don't be shy. Okay.
They are not shy, otherwise they wouldn't sit here.
It was a joke. Maybe just, I have a question. I have many questions actually, but just one question concerning the stereotypes of women in STEM. We say that. So you were talking about men and female or jobs, or perceived as female jobs. But for example, as when technology, digital world state, or informatique, well, all STEM started in the 60s. it was a female occupation. And for example, in Asia, it's considered as a female occupation. And we in Europe consider it as a man occupation. So what makes that suddenly you decide, or society decide, that is a female or a male occupation?
Money. A very simple answer.
But
What
it's
it
also
was a-
political culture. I mean, if we would now we are now in Berlin. I mean, Berlin is half west, half east. But the situation in East Germany was very, very different. So it's money, but it's also, political determination, because in East Germany you really had to take, if you have a given mathematical score or something like this, you had to take mathematics at university. So, and then this really made the world change. And it's still, going on. So it's a way of socializing and reproducing itself. So it can be changed. And therefore we have to fight in Elmo and whenever we have the possibility to talk to male leaders. It can be changed.
I completely agree it can be changed, but also what we see is when there's a big influx of women into a profession, such as medicine, that profession starts to become feminized, quote unquote, and the pay goes down. Right, exactly. That's what I.
Well, this is a very negative conclusion. I'm very sorry, but it can be changed.
Not negative. I said it can be changed. Sorry.
So it can be changed. It can be changed. So that will be the last word for this session. Thank you very much.
If I may, it can be changed also when you've got people fostering investments where we're going to see emerging entrepreneurs also in STEM being female and showing the world that, you can be.
We have next-gen entrepreneurs here. Yeah. So,
well, thank you for this more optimistic conclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maru. Thank you for all of you to being with us.